My name is Ethan Miller, and I was only 12 years old when this happened. I'm 27 now, but some memories don't fade with time. They stay buried somewhere deep in your chest, waiting for the quiet moments to resurface. This is one of those memories. No matter how far I've moved from that place, no matter how much I've tried to forget, the image of that night on the highway still returns, clear, cold, and terrifying. Back then, we lived near the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, a place known for its breathtaking beauty during the day and its unsettling silence at night. Our house stood a little away from the main road, surrounded by tall pine trees that blocked most of the sunlight even in the afternoon. When evening came, fog would roll in slowly, wrapping the roads like a thick white blanket. The locals used to say the mountains had their own moods, and when they turned quiet, it meant something was watching. The Blue Ridge Parkway itself was long, narrow, and unpredictable. During the daytime, tourists drove through it to admire the scenery. But after sunset, the road transformed into something else entirely. Streetlights were rare, mobile signals weak, and long stretches passed without seeing another car. At night, the forest pressed in from both sides, and the darkness felt heavy, almost alive. Every sound, rustling leaves, distant animal cries, the hum of tires felt louder than it should. Growing up there, I often heard whispers about the road. People talked in low voices at gas stations and diners, sharing stories they never fully explained. They warned drivers not to stop for strangers after dark. Some said they had seen figures standing in the fog. Others claimed they heard crying coming from the trees. As a kid, I didn't know what to believe, but I could always sense the fear behind their eyes when the topic came up. That winter night felt different from the start. The air was unusually cold, and the fog arrived earlier than usual. Even before we got into the car, I had a strange feeling in my stomach, like something bad was waiting for us on the road. I remember looking back at our house as we drove away, its porch light glowing faintly through the mist, and thinking how small and far away it already seemed. At 12, I didn't have the words to explain what I was feeling. I just knew that the road ahead didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, and whatever was out there had been waiting a very long time. That evening, my parents decided we would drive back home after visiting relatives in Asheville. It was supposed to be a simple, familiar trip, one we had taken dozens of times before. My father, Mark Miller, insisted it would be faster to leave late and avoid traffic. My mother, Laura, didn't argue, but I could tell she wasn't completely comfortable with the idea. The sun had already dipped behind the mountains, and the sky had turned a dull gray that felt heavier than usual. I sat in the back seat, pressed against the cold window, watching the trees blur past as we pulled onto the highway. At first, everything felt normal. The car's engine hummed steadily, the heater blew warm air, and my parents talked quietly about everyday things: work, groceries, school. But as we climbed higher into the mountains, the road began to change. The fog thickened, crawling low from the forest, swallowing the headlights and shrinking the world to a narrow tunnel of light. Within minutes, visibility dropped so badly that my father had to slow down. The yellow road lines faded in and out like they were being erased and redrawn. Every curve felt sharper, every stretch longer. I remember checking the time on my watch and realizing how quiet it had become. No other cars passed us, no distant headlights, just us, alone, moving through a white wall of fog. The radio, which had been playing softly, suddenly crackled, the music distorted, stretching and bending until it dissolved into static. My father tapped the dashboard, frowning, and tried to change the station. Every channel sounded the same: broken voices, hissing noise, fragments of sound that didn't make sense. Eventually, he turned it off, and the silence that followed felt far worse than the static. That was when my mother spoke, her voice low and cautious. She said she didn't like how thick the fog was getting. She suggested maybe we should pull over for a few minutes, or even turn back. My father shook his head, trying to sound confident. He said the road would clear soon, that we were almost home, but I noticed the way his hands tightened on the steering wheel. As for me, I felt something I couldn't explain. It wasn't just fear, it was a sense of being watched. I kept looking into the fog beyond the headlights, half expecting something to step out of it. My reflection in the window looked pale, almost unfamiliar, and for a moment I didn't recognize myself. The heater suddenly blew cold air, and I shivered despite my jacket. The fog outside pressed closer, thick and unmoving, as if the car was pushing through something solid rather than air. I remember thinking that the road felt wrong, too quiet, too empty, like we had driven into a place we weren't meant to be. None of us knew it yet, but that drive home was about to change everything, and whatever waited ahead on that highway had already noticed us.
For a few seconds, no one spoke. The car idled softly, its headlights locked on the girl standing at the edge of the highway. The fog swirled around her like it was alive, moving in slow, deliberate waves. My father's foot hovered uncertainly over the brake, and I could hear his breathing, slow, controlled, but strained. "Mark," my mother whispered, gripping the door handle. "Please, don't stop." He hesitated. "She's just a kid," he said again, almost like he was trying to convince himself. "She could be hurt." That was when the girl took her first step forward. Not a normal step. There was no sound, no crunch of gravel, no shift of weight. She simply moved. One moment she was standing near the trees, and the next she was closer to the road, her white dress brushing the fog. My heart jumped so hard it felt like it slammed into my ribs. "She's coming closer," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The girl lifted her head a little more, and though her hair still covered most of her face, I felt her attention lock onto us, onto me. The sense of being watched intensified, pressing down on my chest until it was hard to breathe. My fingers curled into the seat fabric, gripping it like an anchor. Then she took another step. She was now close enough that the headlights lit up her dress completely. I could see dark stains along the hem, mud maybe, or something worse. The fabric looked old, worn thin, like it didn't belong to this time. My mother noticed it too. I saw her shake her head slowly, her lips pressed tight, her eyes wide with fear. "Mark," she said sharply now, "drive, right now." But before my father could react, the girl raised her hand again, this time higher, clearer, almost level with the windshield. Her fingers twitched slightly, bending at odd angles, as if her joints didn't work the way they should. The gesture no longer looked like a plea for help. It felt like a signal. And then something impossible happened. Without taking another visible step, the girl was suddenly right beside the road, far closer than she should have been. The distance between her and the car collapsed in an instant, like space itself had folded. I gasped loudly, and my father slammed his foot on the brake. "She didn't walk," I cried. "Dad, she didn't walk." The car came to a complete stop. The girl now stood just a few feet away, her face still hidden behind her hair. The fog wrapped around her legs, thick and unmoving. I stared downward again, my stomach twisting, because no matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't clearly see her feet touching the ground. The air inside the car felt colder suddenly, heavy and damp. The windows began to fog from the inside, as if the cold had seeped through the glass. My ears rang softly, like pressure building before a storm. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the girl tilted her head to the side. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever stood in front of us was not lost, not injured, and not human. She hadn't asked for help. She had been waiting. The moment my father lifted his foot from the brake, everything went wrong. The car began to roll slowly forward, almost on its own, as if the road itself was pulling us away from the girl. My father didn't press the accelerator. He didn't need to. The vehicle crept ahead, tires whispering against the asphalt. I watched the girl through the rear side window, expecting her to grow smaller as we moved away. She didn't. Instead, she stayed right beside us. At first, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. The car was moving, yes, slowly, but clearly moving, yet the girl remained perfectly aligned with the window, her position unchanged. She wasn't walking. Her legs didn't move at all. She simply glided, matching the car's speed with terrifying precision. "Dad," I whispered, "she's still there." My father glanced in the side mirror, then again more sharply, his face drained of color. "That's not possible," he muttered, but his voice trembled. The girl's head began to lift higher now. Strands of hair slid away from her face, revealing more of her features. Her skin was unnaturally pale, stretched tight, as if all warmth had been drained from it long ago. And her eyes, God, her eyes, were completely black. No whites, no reflection, just empty darkness, like holes cut into her face. Then she smiled. It wasn't wide or sudden. It spread slowly, painfully slowly, as if her mouth had forgotten how to make that expression. Her lips pulled back just enough to show teeth that looked dull and gray. The smile held no emotion, no joy, no kindness. It felt like a mockery of something human. The car picked up speed, 10 miles per hour, 15, 20, and still she kept pace. Her head tilted again, farther this time, bending at an angle no neck should bend. I heard a faint sound then, barely audible over the engine, a soft scratching noise, like fingernails brushing against glass. I turned my head slowly toward the window. Her face was inches away now, and in that moment, as her dark eyes locked directly onto mine, I knew she wasn't chasing the car. She was choosing me.
My father was driving as fast as he dared, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed straight ahead. No one spoke. No one breathed properly. The only sounds inside the car were the roar of the engine, the faint rattle of the dashboard, and my own heartbeat pounding so loudly I was sure the others could hear it. The girl was still there. I didn't need to look to know it. I could feel her presence the way you feel someone standing too close behind you. The scratching sound against the window grew clearer now, slow, deliberate strokes like nails being dragged across glass. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would stop, praying this was all some nightmare I'd wake up from any second. Then the fog ahead suddenly shifted. Out of the white haze, bright headlights appeared, fast, blinding, coming straight toward us from the opposite lane. A large semi-truck emerged, its horn blasting loudly as it barreled down the highway. The sound jolted me, snapping my eyes open. For a split second, relief flooded my chest. Another vehicle meant we weren't alone anymore. It meant witnesses. It meant whatever was happening couldn't be real. The truck rushed closer, its lights cutting through the fog like knives. As it reached us, I watched in horror as it passed directly between our car and the girl. There was no impact, no scream, no sound, no reaction. The truck drove straight through her. She didn't move out of the way. She didn't flinch. She didn't vanish instantly either. For one horrifying moment, I saw her body distort, flickering, blurring, like an image struggling to stay solid. Then she was simply gone. The space beside the car was suddenly empty, filled only with swirling fog. I screamed. I don't remember what I said, maybe her name, maybe nothing at all, but I pointed wildly at the window, shaking, sobbing, trying to make my parents understand. She was there! She was right there! My mother turned, her face pale and terrified. "Ethan, there's no one there." My father checked the mirrors again and again, his breathing uneven. "I didn't see anything," he said, but his voice cracked. "The truck didn't hit anyone." The truck's taillights disappeared into the fog behind us, and just like that, the highway was empty again. Too empty. The fog thinned slightly, as if nothing strange had ever happened. Then the car shuddered. The engine sputtered once, twice, and died. The headlights went out. Total darkness swallowed us. My mother let out a cry as the cold rushed in, sharp and sudden. The silence was unbearable, thick, crushing, unnatural. I felt the temperature drop so fast my breath turned shallow. The air smelled damp, old, like earth after rain. That's when the radio turned on by itself. Static hissed through the speakers, loud and violent, filling the car. Beneath the noise, I thought I heard something else, soft, distorted, almost like breathing or whispering. Then, faintly, from somewhere outside the car, I heard footsteps, slow, measured, circling us. Whatever had vanished into the fog hadn't left.
It was just no longer pretending to be human. For a long moment, none of us moved. The car sat dead in the middle of the highway, swallowed by fog and darkness, as if the world beyond us had ceased to exist. My father tried the ignition again. The engine clicked weakly, but refused to start. Each failed attempt made my chest tighten a little more. "Please, please start," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. The radio continued to hiss violently, jumping between static and broken sounds. Every now and then, a faint murmur slipped through, too distorted to understand, but close enough to feel intentional. My father reached forward and shut it off, and the sudden silence was even worse. That's when I noticed how cold it had become. Not just winter cold, this was different. It seeped into my bones, numbing my fingers and toes. My breath came out in shaky clouds, even though the windows were closed. The fog outside pressed against the glass, blurring everything beyond a few inches. I felt trapped inside a bubble of darkness. "Did you hear that?" I asked quietly. My parents froze. There it was again, a sound from outside the car, soft, uneven footsteps on the asphalt. Slow, deliberate, stopping, then starting again. They moved around us, never coming too close, never going too far, like something circling prey. My mother clutched my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. "Don't look," she whispered urgently. But I couldn't help it. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see through the fogged windshield. Shapes shifted outside, just shadows, maybe tricks of the fog, but my heart told me otherwise. Every instinct screamed that if I looked long enough, I'd see her again. Then the knocking started. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks came from the passenger side window. My mother screamed. My father reached for the door lock, hitting it repeatedly even though it was already locked. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracked despite his effort to sound strong. No answer, just another knock. Tap, tap. The sound wasn't hard or violent. It was gentle, patient, like someone politely asking to be let in. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face. Images flashed in my mind, the girl's dark eyes, her twisted smile, the way the truck had passed through her like smoke. Whatever was outside wasn't alive, and it wasn't finished with us. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. The silence stretched, thick, heavy. Seconds passed, maybe minutes. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then the engine roared to life. The headlights flickered on, slicing through the fog. My father didn't hesitate. He slammed the accelerator, and the car lurched violently forward, tires screeching as we sped away. None of us looked back. We drove the rest of the way home in complete silence. No radio, no conversation, just the sound of the road beneath us, and the unshakable feeling that something was still with us, watching from the darkness, memorizing the way home. That night, after we finally reached safety, I lay awake in my bed, staring at the door, because deep down, I knew the road hadn't let us go. It had only followed.
The next morning, the fog had lifted, but the memory of last night's terror clung to us like a second skin. Even sunlight couldn't erase it. My father suggested we stop at the nearest diner in Hillsborough, a small town we had passed a few miles back, hoping someone there could tell us if anyone had seen strange things on the road. My mother and I didn't argue. We were too tired, too shaken, too aware that the highway still held secrets. The diner was quaint, with a classic neon sign flickering open 24 hours. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon was comforting, almost normal, but it did little to ease my anxiety. The few patrons looked up at us briefly before returning to their meals, eyes flicking with polite curiosity. We approached the counter. An older man with a weathered face, salt and pepper hair, and wire-frame glasses smiled, though his eyes seemed guarded. "Morning," my father said cautiously. "We were driving down Blue Ridge Parkway last night and saw something strange, A girl or something in white. Did anyone report anything like that? The man's smile vanished. He glanced toward the back, then leaned in. You saw her, didn't you? His voice was low, urgent. You saw the white bride. The what? I asked, my heart hammering. The white bride, he repeated. Happens every few years. A young woman vanished decades ago. Accident or something darker. They say she roams the parkway, especially near the foggy stretches. Drivers who see her sometimes never make it back the same. My father frowned. What do you mean, never the same? The man hesitated. Some, they get lost. Some vanish. Some are followed home by her spirit. Others never stop seeing her. He shivered. People in Hillsborough know to avoid that road after dark, especially in fog. You were lucky. I could feel the color drain from my face. Lucky? We had barely escaped her the night before. My mother gripped my hand so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Why doesn't anyone do something? I asked, voice shaking. Why is she still out there? He shook his head. No one knows. Some say she died in a car accident in the 1980s. Others say she was wronged and trapped between worlds. Whatever the reason, she's angry and she doesn't forget. A chill ran down my spine. Memories of the truck passing through her, the fog, the knocks at the window, it all rushed back. And now, knowing the story, it made even more sense. She wasn't just a random apparition. She was a part of the road, tied to it, hunting anyone who wandered too close. I looked out the diner window at the highway, now bright in the morning sun, and felt a cold knot of fear. That road was no longer just asphalt and trees. It was alive in a way I couldn't explain. Watching, waiting, patient. The man finally spoke again. If you ever drive that road at night, don't go alone. And if you see her, don't stare. Don't try to help. Just get away. We thanked him quietly, left the diner, and returned to the car. The sunlight was comforting, but it did little to chase away the feeling that she had followed us here, that she might still be watching somewhere beyond the veil of normalcy. I glanced at my mother and father. We hadn't spoken about last night since leaving the highway. Now, the weight of her existence settled between us, a silent reminder. Some encounters don't end when you think they do. By the time we returned home to Ashford, the sun had dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across our quiet neighborhood. The comfort of familiar walls should have eased our nerves, but something about the day's events had left a residue of unease, like fog clinging to your skin. Even as we unpacked our bags, I felt a subtle weight in the air, an almost imperceptible chill that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It started small, a shadow moving across the corner of my eye, a whisper in the hallway, so faint I couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. My mother, trying to distract us, turned on the television, but the flickering light did little to calm my anxiety. My father suggested we have dinner, yet even the clinking of utensils felt hollow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Later that night, around 11 p.m., I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping at the window. My heart jumped. The sound wasn't like the wind or a branch brushing against the glass. It was rhythmic, purposeful. I froze, listening. Tap, tap, tap. Each one sending a shiver down my spine. I whispered to myself, it can't be her. It can't. But deep down, I knew it was. My father, hearing the faint noise, came to check, flashlight in hand. When he approached the window, nothing was there. Just the garden, swaying in the light of the street lamp. Then it happened. The time loop began. I glanced at my clock, 11:13 p.m. A second later, I checked again, 11:13 p.m. The tapping started again, and again the clock stayed frozen. Panic surged through me. It wasn't just an illusion. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker, as though some invisible force had warped time itself. I tried calling my parents, but my voice sounded distant, like I was underwater. The shadows in the room began to lengthen unnaturally. One shape separated from the darkness, tall, draped in white, hair wet and dark, and eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She floated just above the floor, silent, yet her presence filled every corner of the room. I wanted to move, to run, but my body refused. Every instinct screamed at me, yet I was trapped, watching as she drifted closer. Then, almost imperceptibly, the scene shifted. I saw myself again, lying in bed, scrolling my phone, hearing the taps. The same sequence repeated. It was as if I was living the same terrifying minutes over and over, trapped in her loop. My father finally realized it too, shouting my name. The sound broke the spell slightly. I lunged for the door, and my mother grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the living room. The shadow hesitated, as though sensing the weakening hold. Tap, tap, tap. The sound faded as we left the bedroom. We huddled together on the sofa, shaking, staring at the hallway leading to my room. The familiar, safe home no longer felt safe. That night, I understood the terrifying truth. She didn't just haunt the road. She could follow you home. And once she did, she could trap you in moments, looping time itself, forcing you to relive fear until you found a way to break her grip. The night stretched endlessly, the atmosphere in our Ashford home thick with dread. After the endless loop in my bedroom, sleep had abandoned us. My parents and I huddled on the living room sofa, the clock ticking slowly, but not naturally, 11:13 p.m. again. I knew with a sinking certainty that she hadn't left. The floating, white-clad shadow had followed us home. Then it happened. The lights flickered violently. One moment, the hallway was dimly lit. The next, it was pitch black. In that darkness, I felt it, her presence, closer than before. A whisper filled the room, soft, urgent, impossible to ignore. "Why did you come?" The voice echoed, not from one corner, but from everywhere at once, surrounding us, pressing against our minds. Desperation took over. My father grabbed a flashlight, while my mother clutched my hand tightly. We moved cautiously toward the hallway, each step heavy, as if the floor itself resisted our escape. Then, in the faint beam of the flashlight, we saw her, not just the shadow anymore. Her face, pale and soaked with rain, eyes hollow and pleading, looked directly at me. And for the first time, I noticed something new. She wasn't just angry. She was trapped, lost, begging for something I couldn't yet understand. My mother, trembling, spoke aloud. "What do you want from us?" The air shifted immediately. The whisper turned into a voice, faintly coherent. "The road, the wedding, my ending, not theirs." My heart stopped. She wasn't just haunting travelers. Her death, the accident that trapped her spirit, had been unresolved. She had been searching for closure, dragging everyone into her loop because she had no release. I realized then what had to be done. I ran to my laptop, which I had been using earlier to research missing persons and urban legends around the Ashford area. Searching frantically, I found an old news archive from 2002. The bride-like woman was Zainat Miller, a young woman reported missing after a car accident on Blue Ridge Pikeway. Her body had never been recovered. She had been lost, alone, unable to rest, her spirit replaying her final moments over and over. Knowing this, I spoke to her aloud, my voice firm but compassionate. "Zainab, we see you. You're not alone anymore. It's time to let go." The room grew colder still, but the shadows began to thin. Her form wavered, flickering between the solid and the ethereal. Then, slowly, she floated toward the hallway mirror, and I could see tears streaming down her ghostly face. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythmic tapping that had haunted me for hours faded. Her voice whispered one final word, peace. And then she vanished. The loop broke. The clock resumed its normal ticking. The night was quiet, heavy, but finally still. We stayed awake until sunrise, too shaken to sleep. But that morning brought relief. The haunting had ended, at least in our home. Yet a lingering question remained. If a spirit could follow you home, how many others had faced the same relentless loop without escape? The fear of the unseen stayed with me, a reminder that some stories don't end with death. They linger, waiting for closure, waiting for someone to listen. From that day onward, I never drove the Blue Ridge Pikeway at night again, and whenever the wind tapped lightly against my window, I couldn't help but glance toward the shadows, just in case she was watching, just in case she hadn't truly let go.